right, everyone, welcome back. I got Matt Scott back. Matt, how you doing, man?
Doing good, buddy. Thanks for having me back.
Of course. So we're celebrating a big achievement today. Not a lot of people get to do more than one book, let alone three. And today, the Ayatollah Takedown, book three in the Surviving the Lion's Den series is out. So how's it
Yeah.
feel to be a three-time published author?
Liberating. It's when I started, surviving the lion's den. I had only anticipated doing the one, seeing how that would go, and just kind of, um, you know, debating my choices after that. But my publisher, when he read the first one, he's like, "I think you can make a series out of this. So I don't want one book. I want three." So he kind of put me on the spot, and I was like, "Well, these are my choices." So I could say no and just publish the one on my own, or I can have the chance to publish three. And I had some other ideas in the back of my head, but they were nothing more than that. They were just ideas. But sometimes you got to push yourself outside of your comfort zone and just jump in the water and see how cold it is or how hot it is. And um, it's been a fun journey, man. It really has. And this one will fulfill my contract with this publisher. But it also, one of the good things about the Ayatollah takedown is it really enabled me to be able to take a look at the Iranian threat, to the U.S. and to the West and really the rest of the world, and debate, what would regime change look like. I kind of the Ayatollah takedown kind of started as strange as it sounds. Is I was watching Scream 3 one night, and I have no idea what made me watch it. I think it was just one of those things. It was on streaming, and
Right. Just triggered
what the
something.
yeah, just why the hell not? I hadn't seen it in a while. And one of the lines that I think it was Patrick Dempsey said in the movie is like, well, one thing's sure, when you get to the third movie in a series, all bets are off. And I kind of like, well, all right, well, there's no reason for me to constrain myself in any way. So
Yeah,
let's,
it's
I
good
just rolled the
advice.
dice, and yeah, let's see what I can do with trying to make regime change happen in Iran. So it just kind of progressed nicely that way.
So, for those who maybe don't know, because you've been on the
Mhm.
show before,
Yeah.
but for those who maybe don't know, let's briefly recap surviving the Lion's Den and then Iranian Deception, so that you can kind of get them caught up, spoiler free.
Sure, sure. Yeah, so my first novel, my debut novel, Surviving the Lion's Den, it was very much a personal story. I wanted to do a novel about a kidnapped CIA agent. I've always been curious about the Iranian threat to the U.S. because I think there's a lot of books have made Iran the enemy, but a lot of people don't know why. So I really wanted to revisit the 1953 coup of Mohammad Mossadegh, and I also wanted to take people on a tour of Iran because I was very much influenced by the Da Vinci Code and the way Dan Brown took people on a tour of Europe, through the Louvre and stuff like that. So a lot of people don't know, especially from the West, don't know what Iran looks like on the inside. So what I tried to do with that book is I tried to take one character that had, his grandfather was involved in the 1953 coup. The Iranians find him. He goes over there for revenge. And then I've got the CIA agent, Tom DeLange, who got captured and is trying to get out. So let's bring them together and try and find, it's an escape story, but it's also a very personal story because you see Iran through my main character's eyes, Kirk Carruthers. So he is guiding you through Iran. So that's kind of how I left it, with the escape at the end. And then when I went into the Iranian deception, I kind of got my foothold a little bit, my, my footing, I guess I should say, after doing the first book because I learned so much. Now, in Lion's Den, I introduced a character named Ben Thrasher. And I just started playing around with him because he was, just because I had the time and I could. And I could have taken the Kirk Carruthers character from the first book and said, okay, now he's going to go to the CIA, he's going to go through the farm. But I really kind of felt people had seen that before. It's not that uncommon of a story. I'm not, talking down to any of the authors, the big authors out there who have done that. It's just audiences have seen that.
Hmm.
So I kind of put Kirk on the shelf a little bit because I really felt his personal story was done after he, got revenge for his grandfather. But by introducing Thrasher in the first one, it kind of gave me a springboard to the second one, and he was a lot of fun to play with. And what I did with Iranian deception is I had to take this very emotional, almost it's sometimes unstable character, and I said, okay, well, let's take the two worst regimes in modern history, the Iranian regime and the Nazis. Let's put them together and see what I can come up with. So the second novel is really Ben Thrasher's adventure to try and stop the Middle East from being ruled by Iran using a secret connection to the Nazis. And the way I did that was I started the book off by saying the supreme leader is dead and his replacement has been named within 3 hours. So that's kind of how I springboarded into that one. Now I won't spoil too much, but let's just say the Iranian Deception, I left with a little bit of a cliffhanger with one of my characters named Farad. And the Ayatollah Takedown picks up a couple of months right after that, and we jump right into what else is the supreme leader up to, because he tried to pull something off in book two that he got caught on it because of Ben Thrasher. So he's seeking protection from China in order to keep the sanctions at bay. And the reason I did that is because if you look at the how much money the U.S. owes China. If Iran goes to China for protection, they're not going to want to do too much to Iran because China's going to want to protect their interests. So you have that whole deal going on, and then behind the Supreme Leader's back, the chief commander of the Revolutionary Guard is planning a coup, and he's doing it with the CIA's help.
So, speaking of China, before we really get into the Ayatollah takedown, let's
Yeah, it's
talk.
been a lot going on in the sky
Yeah,
with those guys, right?
not only that, but there's been a lot going on in Iran, and we're going to talk about
Yeah.
that too. But you know, what do you think of all this craziness with China and these balloons? And then, of course, Russia's gotten a little more brave, and they've started flying
Yeah.
around too. Like, what do you think about that from like a global geopolitical perspective? What's going on?
Well, I try not to get too political in my interviews, but I think it's safe for me to say at this point that the current administration has not held a very firm stance in holding other countries accountable for their actions. To me, and this is just my opinion, Putin is really viewing the current administration as being very weak,
Mm-hmm.
and they're doing whatever essentially they want. Now, I will say this about the war in Ukraine. We spent the entire Cold War concerning ourselves with how if a war between the U.S. and the Soviet Union happened, how long would that war be? Well, this war in Ukraine has really, boy, did we get that one wrong.
Yeah.
Because if Russia was that strong, Ukraine would be part of Russia right now. But the war
More
has
than
gone
ever.
on for a year.
Yeah.
So number one, I think that speaks a lot about the Ukrainian resistance.
Mm-hmm.
But on the flip side of that coin is look at how much aid the U.S. has now given Ukraine.
Yeah.
And don't think for a second that just because Ukraine has been strong in their stance against Russia, that their government is not corrupt. They were corrupt before the war happened. So it's very concerning to me to see the U.S. giving as much aid to Ukraine as we have, especially considering you got some of the accidents that are going on in Pennsylvania and Ohio right now, and I've always been very suspicious of Hunter Biden. I think he's got his fingers in a lot of pies and has for a while, and has used Joe Biden as his cover.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me is very, very suspicious. The way the Bidens and the Ukrainian government have kind of gotten into bed together. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't help Ukraine out, because it's in our interest to help Ukraine
Absolutely.
prevent Russia from getting strong. So I am definitely saying that is needed.
Yes.
But I think we've gotten a little more into bed with these guys than
Agreed.
we really need to. It's their war to win or lose, and we'll help them because we don't want Putin gaining any more global power than he already has. And
Well, there's innocent people that are dying over there
Yeah,
because of
yeah. I
this.
mean,
So I think as a
exactly.
country that values,
Yeah,
people and the treatment of people, I think, yeah, you're right. We absolutely should be helping out in Ukraine. Are there some questionable things? Yes. There's
yeah,
questionable things about every government on the planet. And as
yeah.
citizens of governments who work for us, I think it's healthy to question them. I don't care what
Absolutely.
political party you are, and anybody listening, I don't judge, but, it's healthy to question what your government is doing with your tax-paying dollars and
Absolutely.
your vote because they work for you. So,
Absolutely.
there's been a lot of checks that have been sent over Ukraine, and I would
Yeah.
argue that is it all necessary? And because we've done that and taken such a stance on that, I think China's gotten a little more brave, and they've said, "Well, what can we get
Yeah.
away with while the Americans are distracted
Exactly.
with NATO and Ukraine?" And
Exactly.
they flew a weather balloon, which to me, I don't understand how that happened. I think there's way too many questions behind that. I mean, you mean to tell me that
Yeah.
NORAD didn't know that was happening?
There
I've
was,
been
yeah,
to
that was,
NORAD. I used to work
yeah.
in Colorado. They knew. you know,
Yeah.
don't
So
tell
that
me that
was,
it got all the way to Montana without anybody realizing it.
that was just, I mean, it was almost a comically odd situation because I saw the thing. I mean, it was over. I was walking out of South Park Mall, going out of Golf Galaxy, and I saw that thing in the sky, and I'm like, all
Yeah,
right,
because
this
it went
is,
all the way over to the East Coast where you
yeah,
guys are.
yeah. So I mean, what I heard, this is what I've heard, okay, and I haven't done as much research on it as I should have, but my understanding of it is China launched something like that during the Trump administration, and they did not make the administration aware of what was happening. Therefore, whatever happened, the balloon didn't get shot down. Now, I don't know if that's true or not,
I haven't heard
but
that either.
this is what I do know. Um, I mean, and this is, I mean, we this is fair to say because we witnessed it on the news. The balloon was in the sky. It was in the sky for a week, right? Just about a week before the order got given to shoot that thing down. Now, I'm going to go back to, let's just say Reagan saw that, President Reagan saw that. That thing would have been shot down within an hour. I
Hmm.
mean, they would not have waited that long to shoot that thing down. So, A, why did the administration wait as long as they did to shoot it down? B, of all the things that China can do, why the hell is a balloon used as a spy technique? I mean, that is the most low level technology you can find, given the fact that they have satellites
Yeah.
that can look at your wristwatch and tell you
Hmm.
what time it is.
Makes you wonder if it was
So,
just a distraction to something else.
it's so hard to tell.
Yeah.
My original reaction was, they were taking a look at the power grids, because if you drive along any street in America, you're going to see, power stations. They got fences up, they got barbed wire, but there's nothing else there. I
Yeah.
mean, if somebody decides to take that out, we're
Easy.
screwed.
Yep.
Easy. I mean, and Kyle Mills wrote about that in one of his novels, and
Sure did.
it was scary how easy that is, and that scares me. The whole balloon thing, I guess what scares me the most about it is it makes me wonder whether or not they were looking at weather patterns. And if that's the case, what do they have up their sleeve? Now, I heard one of the FBI directors say at one point that China's spies aren't that good. He compared them to burglars breaking in to somebody's house and knocking over lamps and stuff like that. And I was like, well, okay, I hadn't expected that, but you're the one on the front lines and you see it, so that makes sense. So for them to use a balloon is just the oddest thing in the world to me, and it scares me that I can't figure out why it is that they would use something that's so low level, because there's something going on there that obviously I'm not in the position in the intelligence community to be able to guess, but I don't know. And the fact that they got away with it for a week, picking up whatever kind of intel they picked up. I mean, there's no telling what they got from it.
Yeah.
I don't know what that could be. I mean, because they're just looking out down geographically. Now, were they picking up cell phone signals and
Yeah. What
anything
else?
else?
Yeah. What other tech did they have on board?
Yeah, I mean, I would love if there's a book written on this in a couple of years. I will be the first one to go out and buy it because I want to know what they found when they shot that thing off the coast of Myrtle Beach.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't know that we have treaties with other countries and their militaries to come do reconnaissance here in the United
Hmm.
States. And we have
Hmm.
them with them to go do reconnaissance there.
Yep.
Under the fair game, fair play type of war
Sure.
thing where you want to fly over our bases here, you can do it, but you're going to do it at this time. We're going to escort you. You're not going to have
Right.
weapons, and they have that.
Right.
So it kind of makes me wonder, was that one of those things that we agreed to, but it wasn't, there was no escort? And then why did we let it go all the way to the East Coast before we shot it down? There's just so many questions. And like you said, if somebody writes a book on it, a tell all, and really gives us the nitty gritty and the dirty, I want to have it too, because
Yeah.
so many open ended questions. I
Yeah,
think
and it's
any administration probably would have been dealing with this. Like, what the heck is going on?
yeah, yeah. I did not understand the lack of response for as many days as people were. I mean, shooting videos of it with their cell phones and posting it to social media.
Yeah,
I mean, in terms of spycraft, I mean,
it was horrible.
the scariest thing for me is that China wasn't even shy about it. They were like, yeah, we're spying on you. Here it is. Here's the balloon.
Hmm.
Now, because it had been a distraction for them to be doing something else, absolutely. I mean, that's common spycraft. But I mean, I've just never seen somebody be so bold about it.
Yeah.
And it was that and the fact that it just makes you wonder what else is going on
Hmm.
in our negotiations with China that makes them think that they could do something like that and get away with it so easily. Because the lack of response, at least that has not been reported by the mainstream media about America's response to China's doing that is concerning to me
Yeah.
because if the Soviets had been doing that during the Cold War, I mean it was I mean
It would have
look
been
at
a
what
war.
happened with Gary Powers and the U-2 spy plane. I mean that was a big enough deal. Can you imagine if they tried to fly a balloon over here over Alaska? I
Yeah.
mean, it's that is just so concerning to me. It just doesn't seem like it's being taken seriously, and maybe behind closed doors it is,
Yeah.
but for somebody who's on the outside looking in, like I am, I mean, I try and stay up on the news and see what's going on behind the scenes, but I have not seen a lot. Now, have
Yeah.
I been looking at it, as deeply as I've done for some of the research for my novels? No, I haven't, but um, yeah, I would expect to see, a very open response, a critical response to something like this, and I haven't seen it.
So, speaking of doing research for your novels, it's been a while since we've talked last, and a lot has changed in Iran, and your books are very Iran heavy. Um,
Yeah,
let's talk about some of the just absolute atrocities that have been going on over there um,
yeah.
in Iran when it comes to human rights and women's rights and all that. I mean, what do you think about all that?
Well, first of all, I think the protests are long overdue, and you should. I think all of us should be proud of the Iranian people for protesting the way that they have, and they're still going on. I mean, I think it started in what August or September, and it's still going on. And I think this is the way to expose the Ayatollah regime the way it needs to be exposed. Now, I mean, I'm hearing all kinds of crazy stories. I mean, I'm hearing the Revolutionary Guard is killing kids. I've heard they've been taking people up in airplanes and just throwing the protesters out into the Indian Ocean. There's a lot of atrocities that are happening, and as sad as as those things are, and they are incredibly sad. The way to bring awareness to what the regime is doing, sadly, is to see to have those things happen. And don't get me wrong. I mean, you don't. I don't want to see this happen to anybody. But what I've learned during the course of my research is, you know, doing an undercover coup these days is much harder. With the mainstream media and social media being the way it is, the way you impact change the heaviest is you expose them. If you think about it like, almost like almost like the Harvey Weinstein scandal, right?
Hmm.
Would we have known about something like this had the media not gotten hold of it?
Right.
So, so that's my novels are also very media heavy because I have to take a look at how that has changed, since the good old days of the Cold War. So exposing what they're doing is just as important as rebelling to what they've done. And don't get me wrong, I do not want to see anybody get thrown out of planes, get shot. I don't kids getting shot. I mean, it is truly truly tragic what's going on over there. But the more that stuff gets reported, the more pressure is going to be put on the Ayatollah regime because they're trying to hide it as much as they can. And in this day and age, that's harder to do. But one of the things that I go into in the Ayatollah Takedown is the Iranian internet network and how they can go about shutting down, Instagram and some of the other social media platforms. Now, Facebook and Twitter are not allowed in Iran for whatever reason. They do allow Instagram, but they also get around it by using the VIN networks and some of the other like third-party messaging apps that are maybe less popular here in the U.S. So I wanted to go into that in the novel, but I think as long as the protests can keep happening, the more pressure is going to be put on them because the supreme leader himself he's getting up there in age, and I've heard anything from liver cancer to he has a heart condition, and we just don't know because the information is so controlled out of there. But the more pressure that can be put on him, the better chance for regime change we have. Now, allowing regime change to happen, it happening is one thing. The other thing is step two is like who takes his place. So
Right. Yeah.
uh,
You gotta backfill it with someone who's gonna do
yeah,
progress, not recession.
exactly. So I mean, what good would it do Iran if Ayatollah Khomeini steps down or dies suddenly and it's he's replaced by his son or something like
Yeah.
that? I mean, you're not gonna be making progress. Now
It's
you
just like
could
North
put
Korea, you know,
exactly,
no
exactly. I
progress at
mean,
all. Just kept rolling
yeah.
with the same punches.
Exactly. So, international pressure, I think, is the best way to make that happen. And that's kind of, I come up with a very creative scenario. I really can't wait to see what you and some of the other readers think about Chapter 33 because it's I really rolled the dice on creatively on how to implement change. And Chapter 33 is really the climax of the novel, and it's definitely different. It's definitely creative, but um, if you think about it, I think it's one of the more plausible scenarios if it could happen. So a lot of books and movies, you think about, it all depends on one chapter or one scene. If you believe that scene, you're going to believe the rest of the book or movie or whatever. Um, and it was a big risk for me to do that, but sometimes you gotta, like I said, push yourself out of your comfort zone. And I'm rolling the dice on chapter 33, and I hope people like what I come up with.
So let's talk. Let's talk the Ayatollah takedown. You've kind of progressed
Yep.
and shown over the course of the first two books, kind of pulled the curtain back on Iran and what they're kind of doing. And it just so happened a lot of these atrocities in Iran have kind of happened at the same time, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
how does that really help with research on the book? And when did you kind of come up with the third storyline? And how did the kind of the things that were going on over there kind of affect how you built it? Because all of us as authors that are coming up with ideas and trying to plot and do outlines, and then a weather
Mhm.
balloon flies over Montana, and we go, ooh, you know,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
does that mess with the storyline, or did you kind of have it once? You got the first book done, and you said, okay, I got 2 and 3. Did you kind of have a straight and narrow you're going on?
Um, well, I knew I, I had to give my publisher the title of the third book when I got my first deal. So I knew that I was going to be dealing with regime change by the time I finished the first one. So I had that idea in my head. But once I finished the second one, the Iranian Deception, once the layout and everything for that one was done, I took maybe a couple of weeks off, 2, 3 weeks maybe, and then I went straight in to the Ayatollah Takedown.
Okay.
It was almost comforting for me to see the protests that are happening in Iran right now. But by that time, the draft of book 3 was already done. So it was I felt justified in a little bit, simply because those are the kinds of things that lead to the type of regime change that I'm writing about. But I didn't want to rework my story in any way, simply because I liked what I came up with in the third book. So I pretty much took my standard process. I envisioned an idea. I write it out on paper. Maybe a third to 2/3 of the book, and then I kind of jump into it. And then I have an Excel spreadsheet, and I'll go chapter by chapter. And if we haven't seen Ben Thrasher for 5 chapters, or Farad for 5 chapters, and then I start shuffling them around. But one of the best things that happens to me is I feel the pressure when I'm writing, because if I've only come up with half to 2/3 of the book, I means I've got another half to third, excuse me, to finish up. So in that case, pressure is a good thing, and I'm kind of going with my instincts, and that's what to me has been so liberating about the writing process, because I don't have to report to anybody else but myself, and I'm going on my own instincts based on my knowledge of the characters and where I want them to go, and I just kind of go with it from there. As far as research goes, I still wanted to take people on a tour of Iran. So one of the things you're going to see is the Falak ul Aflak Castle in Iran. And when the book comes out, matter of fact, probably later today, tomorrow at the latest, on my website, I always post a briefing summary of everything, of all the sites in Iran that people can take a look at and say, okay, so this is the castle that he was talking about. This is where Farad and Danya went for their little romance in the caves. So there's a little bit of a spoiler for you. There's going to be some romance between Farad and Danya.
Okay.
So that I just kind of I'm one of those guys that really has an idea, and I just kind of stick with it. Something really phenomenal would have to happen to make me alter my storyline, and I'm not saying that's not possible. I'm just saying, I don't like to look back. It's one thing to kind of tie up loose ends a little bit, on storylines if they're not tight, but to totally rework something, I'm not a big fan of that unless I can take a look at it and say, okay, what I've got going just isn't working. I've got to take away these 30 pages or 30 chapters or whatever it is, and kind of go from there. So I wish I could say I was inspired by what's happening, but who knows? Maybe what's happening was inspired by me.
Yeah. So let's
That's totally selfish. That's totally selfish. I shouldn't say
yeah.
that, because the
No, I
the,
love
the
it. It's
girl that got
awesome.
killed in Iran is truly a
Yeah.
tragedy. But
Yeah, that's watching it on the news and seeing it and just going, man, you know what? And it makes me really think about it in perspective. And I've heard a bunch of podcasters say this lately. Um, we don't know how good we have it over here. We really don't. And we
absolutely,
bitch and complain about the littlest things, and
yeah,
we have no idea how well we actually have it. And then you see stuff on the news like that where it's like women are literally being beaten in the streets over there in front of their
yeah.
homes. And their homes, by the way, are not homes like what we have here in the United States.
Oh
They're
no,
they're worse than our worst homes. And
yeah.
they're just happy to have it, and they're getting beat out in the street right in front of it. So like,
Mhm.
I don't want to hear people complain. I don't want to hear you
No,
complain that they left tomatoes on your burger at Chili's. I really don't care,
yeah,
because
no,
we have it. We're lucky to have tomatoes on our burger. Like,
absolutely,
do not complain. Like,
no,
there's worst places in the world.
yeah,
We got it so good here.
yeah. People need to realize that. As a matter of fact, my wife and I were excuse me, my wife and I were having dinner um, out in the South Park area, and I noticed someone that had a Free Iran T-shirt on, and it turns out that she was Iranian, and she came over here probably 6 or 7 years ago, and she was one of the ones that's leading the Free Iran protests here in Charlotte. They usually have them every other week, I think, uptown. And so I got to talk to her, and uh, it was fascinating for me to actually finally be able to speak to someone who is Iranian. And they really went on about the same kind of things that you just spoke about. It's like, we have it really good. I mean, do you know how liberating it is for me to be able to walk out without a hijab over my hair, um, and be able to protest something here without being shot?
Yeah.
So we need to keep those things in mind, and not to sound like an old man here, but the youth of today really is social media has allowed them to take that for granted in a really big way.
So let's talk about the Ayatollah Takedown. Spoiler free. Obviously, people need to go get their copy and not rely on this episode to
Yeah.
give them the details. But let's talk about it a little bit, not just from a third book perspective, but from kind of
Uh-huh.
like a culmination perspective, because the whole point
Okay.
in the series was kind of to show what was going on with Iran and
Hmm.
some realistic, maybe drastic scenarios in which a regime that has kind of been untouchable for a large part of history,
Right.
and nobody's really kind of dared to poke that bear in the eye.
Yeah.
And here we are, we have an author like you talking about it and saying, well, what if, Um, so what is the Ayatollah takedown in perspective of like the third book culmination? What's going on? What's happening?
The Ayatollah takedown. It's the basic plot of it is regime change and how that would happen. Obviously, the 53 CIA coup of Mohammad Mossadegh is still fresh in Iranians' minds, even 70 years after it happened. Anytime an Iranian meets an American, I think when one of the 60 Minutes guys went over there, a few years ago, that was one of the things that they brought up to him. I mean, and so it's always fresh in their minds because whether or not we like it or not, Mohammad Mossadegh was democratically elected, and a lot of the way he kind of cozied up to the Soviets was not good for America, but um, and there was a lot of Red Scare going on at the time, so I wanted to take a look at the coup in perspective because if you look at it from the 53 perspective, it was a success. We reinstalled the Shah that was kind of close to us. We secured an oil deal, and we prevented the Soviet Union from gaining another province or state or whatever they used to call them. So from that perspective, it was a success. But in the long term, it has done so much more damage than anybody could have ever envisioned. So when you look at the Ayatollah regime and what it has become today, you can't ignore the 53 coup. So if you want to do regime change, how would we go about that? How would it be successful? And that's kind of what I wanted to play with a little bit. Because in my opinion, if it's going to happen, um, it's got to happen from the inside. And that's why I chose Chief Commander of the Revolutionary Guard, my character Ramin Lejani, to be the one that's kind of leading the charge on it. Now, obviously, with me having the characters of Ben Thrasher and Beth Jenkins, I'm very CIA heavy. So I didn't want to cut them out. So he something like this can't be accomplished, I don't think, without help from the West. But in the end, it's not. It's his coup to lead and to win or lose. So I basically said Ben Thrasher and Beth Jenkins, they're out of the CIA. They have governmental approval to do this, but if it doesn't work and they get caught, they're on their own, and I think that's the way it has to be. And I put a lot of other things in there, about the backlash of what would happen if it fails, the backlash for Israel if it fails. So I tried to put as many uh, elements as I could into the novel, geopolitically. I mean, obviously, I'm confined to 300 to 400 pages, so I can't do everything. But I tried to include as many major elements as I could, to consider what would happen if the coup fails and what the backlash would be from that. But in the end, it was a fun story to write, and I'll give everybody just a little bit of a spoiler. After um, the conference fails at the end of the Iranian deception, I open up with a torture scene, and the president of Iran is hanging on a horizontal bar in a U-shaped position, belly down, and a flame is dancing above his sternum or his belly, and he's just hanging there by his arms and his legs. So think of the pressure of of the joints in your hips and your arms of being hanging that way, and that is a real torture position. It's called kebabbing.
Mm.
So we open up with Supreme Leader punishing the president of Iran for his failure at the conference that ended the Iranian deception, and they put Farad in their crosshairs from the start. So it kind of develops from there.
So now that this is out and you got 3 books under your belt, you said
Yeah.
it fulfills your contract with the current publisher. What's next? Is there a 4th book? Is there a new storyline? Are you creating a world? Or what do you got next on the table to do?
Well, the big thing for me right now is I'll be going to BoucherCon in San Diego in the fall. I have never actually been to a writers' conference. I saw the pictures that you and some of the other authors when you were in Minnesota last year, and I was like, oh, I'm so jealous. I'm going. I've got to go. I've got to go.
It was fun.
So I really want to, meet some of the bigger authors because I met Brad Meltzer and he was in Winston Salem here recently, and I met David Baldacci on another occasion, and this time actually Baldacci, excuse me, is going to be the guest of honor, and I'm hoping that I will get to meet him again simply because book one for me started with a meeting with him, and he basically told me, I told him about the book. He's like, well, what are you waiting for? Um, so I would like to be able to meet him again, but I definitely want to be able to meet other guys like Taylor Moore and Kyle Mills that I hope will come, and Don Bentley, Mark Graney. So that is going to be big for me. In terms of the next book, yeah, I don't have a 4th book planned at this moment. This one will fulfill my contract. And not to throw my publisher under the bus, but they put me on a really tight timeline for books 2 and 3. So between editing, writing, and marketing, I need a break for a little bit. But that being said, we'll see what happens with the Ayatollah Takedown. Could there be a 4th book in the series? Absolutely. I'm not done with the Iranian threat. I think I left a lot of things open ended that could allow me to keep going there. I've also thought about, I have some other ideas, kind of dancing around in my head a little bit about, I'd love to do a series on North Korea. Not a lot of people know what's going on inside there. And one of the most intriguing stories that I ever heard about North Korea is for those of you who don't know, I'm a big professional wrestling fan. And I grew up in the Attitude Era of Stone Cold Steve Austin and
Yep.
The Rock and all that,
Oh,
the
yeah.
Monday Night
The,
Wars.
the
So
best era.
the best era for sure. You'll never see something like that happen again.
No.
But I think it was 95, 94, 95 when WCW, the rival to the WWE at the time, took a handful of wrestlers over to North Korea for a wrestling match. And the fans, there was a really good documentary on it on Dark Side of the Ring, I think on the Vice channel. And it was very eye-opening because the wrestlers are sitting there doing their thing in the ring and they're bringing it, but no one in the arena knew what they were watching. It took them a minute to figure out because, the Kim Jong Un, was it Un or Il? I can't remember at the time.
Un's the current
Yeah,
one.
yeah, Kim Jong Il. Okay. He told them, you have to be there. So everybody showed up. And to this day, technically, that has been the biggest wrestling event in world history. Technically, they were forced to be there, but technically, that in terms of attendance, that's the record.
Right.
So I kind of started thinking. I was like, well, what if one of the wrestlers was a spy? That could be that could be interesting. And I've thought about doing maybe a storyline of a retired CIA officer, working in the States on some of the judicial cases that have gone cold, and kind of him doing the apprehending the suspects his way. When you're a writer, you're a writer for life. So no matter if you're in the shower or you're driving in your car, ideas are always dancing around in your head.
Oh
And
yeah, I got notes upon notes in my phone
oh
now
yeah,
of stuff. I'm like, I don't know if I'll ever start that, but it sounds good.
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, look, I got a notebook here,
Hmm.
just sitting on my desk, and there's pads all around the house. It drives my wife crazy. But you never really stop being creative. So I've got some pretty good ideas, I think, in my head. I have not put anything to paper yet, just because I kind of want book 3 to breathe a little bit, and I need
Yeah.
a little bit of a break. But um, for those of you who are fans of my novels, I'm not done yet. I've got some more left in me. It's just I need to bring this one to a close and start the new chapter. But I'm confident there will be another chapter. I just don't know what it's going to be yet.
So if you haven't gone and picked up the Surviving the Lion's Den series, you got book 1, Surviving the Lion's Den. It's that beautiful blue cover that's behind me and behind Matt. Of course, then you have the Iranian Deception, awesome red cover that he has behind him, and then of course the third, the Ayatollah Takedown, which is out now that you can get. Beautiful green cover, and if you go onto his social media, you can even see the animated versions of those covers and the book trailers, which are super cool. Never seen anything quite like it before. Having a 3D, video like feel to a cover. It's almost like a GIF that they have on there. Of the way it moves, it's very very cool. But Matt, before I let you go and get back to promoting this book, where can people find out more about you? Get on a newsletter so they can just stay in touch, and become super fans.
You can always email me on my website or sign up for the newsletter at mattscottbooks.com. On social media, on Twitter and Instagram, I am at Matt Scott Books. And you can find me on Facebook. I just have a regular Matt Scott account. There is a Matt Scott Books account that I post with some of the official stuff, but my personal account is the one that I use the most. I respond to everybody. It does not matter what platform it is. If you want to get a hold of me, I will definitely respond. I love communicating with anybody who gets in touch with me. And since you mentioned those the animated covers, if for the writers that are out there, if they're impressed with them, send me a message. I'll hook you up with the lady in Alaska that does those covers for me. So um, hope you enjoy it, and definitely stay in touch because there's more to come.
All right, guys, that was Matt Scott. Make sure you go pick up a copy of the Ayatollah Takedown. And if you haven't picked up the first two, get all three while you're at it because they're excellent books. Very unique storyline. He really writes about something about Iran that we haven't really seen or heard from before. And he's an absolute fantastic guy. We'll be taking pictures in BoucherCon here later this year. And stay tuned on social media for more.